You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Cruikshank. Our podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts, Rachel Land and Katja as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs. We are back and we're here for a fun 1-year anniversary episode to kind of celebrate and also talk about all the things, go over kind of all of the things we've talked about. We've gone through so many different conversations and topics and so many great takeaways. So we wanted to do a shorter, hopefully, we were laughing about that before this got started, that, we'll often aim for a short episode and ends up being an hour. But hopefully a shorter episode to recap some of that stuff. And, coming back to our purpose too, and our goals here about really sharing information at this intersection of science and research with traditional practices that have held the test of time that we still don't completely understand in research and scientific awarenesses. So being able to look at where those converge, being able to sometimes dive into one side or the other, and also share our experiences. I think one of the beautiful things about yoga medicine is that we train our teachers to really think for themselves, to really be thought leaders. And so most of our teachers go out and specialize in some way, whether that's in teaching group classes or teaching Parkinson's patients or working with cancer or, teaching senior populations or whatever that might be. And so it's so cool and interesting. And then doing a thesis and a research topic on a specific demographic at some point in their training. And so it's really fun to have these resources, some of which have healthcare backgrounds or have specific backgrounds in other ways that can bring and kind of fuse that together to talk as experts in their own experience and maybe in their education as well. I feel like over the years we've just kind of noticed just how incredibly potent this community is, and so it's been such a privilege to be able to watch our teachers go out in the world. And then also, more importantly, I felt like I was losing all this connection to our teachers, but now get to hear them come back and bring their experiences and kind of go full circle within our community as our teachers become the thought leaders, which is what I love. I hope everyone, I love it when our teachers become the experts as well. So we're going to talk about some things that we loved from just doing the podcast. Then we're going to go into some favorite topics. Then we're going to go over some favorite themes that have come up, and then we'll conclude. So let's start with some things that we've loved about the podcast or about doing the podcast in general.
It's got to be the connection side. It has to be. I mean, not just talking to people to record the episode, but for me personally, getting messages from people afterwards to say that the episode really helped them, or that the themes really resonated, or that they thought it was an important conversation. Especially over the past couple of years, having those connection points with people has been just surprisingly touching and important, and it makes, for me anyway, the work well and truly worth doing.
You must be more interesting than me because I don't get those. I don't get the message.
I definitely am.
Maybe it's a good thing. I
definitely am more interesting.
But I love hearing that. I love hearing the comments. And I said,
I'm sorry, Tiffany. Yeah. I'm getting messages too. So I don't know what you're doing.
I've always been a loner.
Send Tiffany a message, for God's sakes. I think people just assume that you're too busy to listen to their messages, but Katja and I, we're approachable.
It's probably good. Sometimes we get overwhelmed, but it's nice to hear. Through you guys.
Ouch.
I actually also, apart from the connection part, which obviously has been amazing and connecting, throughout the whole planet, even on this call, I'm just enjoying the thought of us being spread out around the globe and getting to chat and yeah, getting in touch with people around the globe and chat and having that sense of connection is great. And then also way more egoistic than that, I've just enjoyed a lot prepping for all the episodes and then finding kind of an excuse to dive deeper into stuff and prep for it. And it's a little bit like back at university where you had like to do that one paper on a certain
Mm,
topic you would otherwise not have looked into. So
right?
sometimes I'm just enjoying that. So the nerdy part of me is just very excited about all the episodes. And I mean, we get to pick, so I get to
Right?
decide on my own papers, homework papers now, and that's just very much fulfilling and satisfactory to my nerdy side.
I love that.
I agree. It has really
Yeah.
inspired me to get back into my own learning and to do online courses and to read books again. My gosh, in the few years before starting the podcast, I don't think I had read a book for enjoyment, only for, research for years. So it's been for me really fun to get back into learning a nice wide range of topics and things that I don't need to be a specialist in, but I'm just curious to know a little bit more about.
Isn't it? I feel like everyone who comes to our trainings, we kind of draw people who are like us. I think a lot of the people in the yoga medicine community are very curious and nerdy like that. I know I love it too.
Mhm,
It's one of my favorite things about creating a new training or new course is just like getting to dive deep in the information and the research. And like I always have this dream of like going and like renting a house and, like people, you always have these like fantasies of people writing books and like just diving into a course and writing something. I always love I love being able to jump in deep. And one of the things I love too is being able to debunk myths. There's so many myths out in the
mm,
yoga world and not necessarily in a way that invalidates other ways of thinking because I think there's really an important place for everything. This kind of like social media and the internet loves drama and it loves to like have these really these catchy dramatic phrases and it's not that's really not who we are at yoga medicine, but really to bring more knowledge rather than to say that one way is right or wrong, just looking at it from, an understanding of the body and also trying to notice what is good research, what is not so good research, and also leaning toward less kind of fear-based tactics and being able to motivate and empower people. I think there've been so many of those great takeaways from our episodes this year. It's been
mm.
fun to see that in people.
Yeah, I think it's tempting to do the 3 things that you must do or the one thing you must never do again because those really grab people's attention, but real life situations are so much more complicated than that. People are
Mm,
surprising, their responses are surprising,
mhm.
and so I love that too, that the podcasts always offer a really wide range of perspectives for people to draw from as opposed to saying, "This is how it is."
Right, and inspire and provoke thought, so that
Mhm,
there's not a closed off way of doing things, but it's kind of like opening up different avenues of thinking or teaching or
mm.
exploring in your own practice, and I love that.
Yeah, when I looked into like a couple of the topics, a song that actually came up to mind very often was one by Katie Melua. I don't know if you guys remember her. It's been a while. So one song by her, Katie Melua. Look
Are
her
you gonna
up
sing it for us?
if you can. Of course.
Rachel was singing before the podcast, I was like, "Wow, you have a good voice."
Give me a
I am
microphone.
not exactly sure this is going to improve the ratings, so let's just skip that one. Anyhow, the song is called Spider's Web, and a part of the lyrics goes, the line between right and wrong is the width of a thread of a spider's web, and I just
Mm,
love that
Ah,
one, and yeah, it's just so much truth lies to me in the gray spaces and not in the black and white. And like you said, the sexy headlines are often either black or white because they just draw a lot of attention. Um, of
mhm.
course, it doesn't only hold true for the yoga world, but also a little bit sometimes. And I just like that. Yeah, not erring on that side, but
mm.
Yeah.
appreciating the gray spaces.
It doesn't great make for great ratings, but we're happy just to draw a really sweet, intimate, cozy, like-minded community. So I
Mm.
really like that we've offered so many different interesting topics too and perspectives. I loved the South Asian yoga teacher panel, which was so cool to
Mm.
hear all the different perspective. And so let's hop into some of those topics now too. I think there have been a lot of great. I was looking through my notes too and going like, wow, we really have covered so much information.
Mhm.
Favorite topics, favorite podcasts, favorite
You can't
things.
have a favorite child, Tiffany. How could
I
I
know.
choose? How could I choose? Come on.
I
Katja knows
know.
you can't have a favorite child, can you?
Well, I know me and Katja are
Ah,
like, we love the Robert Schleip one. I did. I mean, it
that's
was
my
just
single
like,
favorite episode. Mhm.
right, come on.
Yeah.
He's he's Robert
What I
Schleip.
loved about that episode was that he's been working in the field in depth, head down for years, but he has retained his excitement and enthusiasm. He's not jaded.
And
He was
childlike
keen to
wonder.
share. Yes.
He really has this childlike wonder, and I really think that's important. I know it is for me too. Like, once I lose that curiosity, like, everything changes. So,
Mhm.
I love that about him.
Yeah, I
That's
think
really his
maybe that's our
superpower, isn't it?
unanimous favorite episode. He's just a gem to humanity, isn't he?
And Katja, you work with him, so you know him well.
Yeah, it's really not just on a podcast episode, but just that's just really how he is. And I think he makes people so interested and curious and gets sparkle in people's eyes who have that sense of interest or that sense of yeah, passion for the topics that we're talking about on here. So it's I think the episode with him was really a great one that really showed his way and how he's
Mhm.
engaged with the topic, and I obviously love to have him on the podcast. So
And
yeah, I
hopefully
would have
brought a
to
bunch of
say
people over to the Fascial Research Society. He
Mm.
does such great work there, and maybe at the Fascial Research Congress, the meetings every few years. So check it
yeah.
out if you haven't. A little
Yeah,
plug.
hands down, favorite guest. And I think selfishly, one of my other favorite guests was Mark Hunter, who is one of my family members,
Aw.
one of my
Our
mentors,
only
one of my
man on
closest
Yoga
friends.
Medicine Online. Sorry. I just get so excited because he's our only man. I'm
And
like,
it was such a pleasure because he's just such a humble guy. In our family, we're all very assertive, strident people. So he rarely even gets to speak much in our family. And he's working hard, long hours every day. And it was just such a pleasure to kind of give him the floor and have him share some of the incredible things he does.
he always seems so like wise and calm and I've in person he is too, I've met him
Yeah,
a few
he has a
times.
lot of time to, I think, clarify his own thinking while he's listening to my mum and I yammer on.
And I love that they're both like longtime body workers and he's a longtime yoga teacher. So it's fun to
In
have
full
that.
circle, Robert Schleip really inspired them to change careers way back. They did a course with him years and years ago, inspired them to kind of shift the orientation of their careers and start talking about fascia. They couldn't stop talking about fascia, the two of them. So it was really lovely to kind of have Mark on the same podcast as Robert Schleip. Yeah, full circle.
Which I think was what kind of got you interested in it with us, right? Or no?
Yeah, slowly. I think they talked about fascia a lot, and I would roll my eyes and again with the fascia.
Well,
And
this
then I
was a
went
long
to
time
a
before fascia was popular.
It
So,
was, it was,
yeah.
it was a long, long time before. And then I went to yoga medicine and started hearing about it from Tiffany. I was like, oh, maybe there's something in
Oh.
this fascia thing.
Hmm.
My poor
Things are
long
weird
suffering
until you
parents.
hear about it, right? Until it becomes familiar. It's weird.
Eh, now you're getting the eye rolls, maybe from
Yeah.
other family members.
Probably
Yeah.
behind my back.
All the research
actually,
reviews, I think, have been wonderful. I mean, I just, like we said, love digging in. It's been so nice to have Katya bring that information and get to chat. What are your favorites, Katya?
I think one of my favorites was with Mackenzie Kozlowski,
Mhm.
because it was just like an open and honest conversation about life transitions and about how things sometimes you have to be in the right spot at the right moment. When she talked about her yoga career, and then also
Mhm.
just how her life shifted significantly, and how that still connects, and I could relate to that personally a lot. And I just love the openness of that conversation, just keeping it real, keeping it down to
Mhm.
earth, and then drawing that connection from kind of one life to another, sort of. I love that, just the vibe of that one. I really enjoyed a lot.
Here, I thought
It
you
was
were
a
gonna
great
say your favorite
conversation.
research episode.
Ah, my favorite
I love
research
that you went
episode.
to make it to another one. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, my favorite research episode. Actually, I
Drum
think
roll.
one of my favorites was probably either fascia as a sensory organ or fascia and pain.
Mm.
Mm.
I think those two topics always kind of get me, and they bring together so many strings. So maybe one of those two. How about you, Tiffany?
It's hard to
Which
pick.
one?
I mean, I love one of our first was the placebo. I mean, for me, I just think it's such a great topic for anyone in healthcare and yoga. And
Mm.
it gets so much negativity, but it really is the power of the mind. And it's such a cool topic. I've always been fascinated by it. And so I really like that one. But all of the research reviews I think are so much fun to be able to talk about. We've done so many of them now. So yeah, both important.
And then the other thing that I really enjoyed were episodes that I went into thinking, well, this one's not going to really resonate for me, or I'm not going to get super excited about it. And then I'd be surprised. Like, for example, talking
Ooh,
about
what is it?
anxiety with Aisha Fakro. I went in thinking I'm not
Oh,
particularly anxious. I don't work with any students who define anxiety as their primary reason for doing yoga. I don't know how much I'll get out of it. And
interesting.
it was just studded with really helpful gems that apply to everyday anxiety as well as anxiety
Interesting.
as a yeah, so there've
I
been
always
quite
feel
a
like
few
anxiety is such
episodes.
a hot topic. Like that's
No, it
really
is.
surprising to me.
It's
Yeah.
just not the area that I work really closely with. So I was like, yeah, well, it'll be
She's
good, but I don't
great.
know how much will apply. She is, yeah.
She's
Super fun.
I love listening to her and I love talking with her. She's such just a genuine, incredible human. So yeah. And on the personal note too, I really enjoyed I really personally enjoyed filming the podcast with Catherine Budig. She's a friend of mine
Yeah.
forever, and she was just in town recently. We finally got to see each other after so long, and now both of us have these senior dogs. Like it was nice to chat with her, and I really love that we have that balance of like really brainy, nerdy. Like I need both of those, and the
Mhm.
like more personal conversations to be able to do the research roundups, but then also have community conversations with our experts and our teachers, or be able to have some more of that expert information through our specialists as well. So our expert insights
And I
too.
love the fact that we've given the podcast episodes now subtitles so that you know going in,
Yeah.
is it going to be a research roundup? Are you listening to somebody who is, a qualified expert in this field? Or are you listening to somebody sharing their personal story and their own experience? And one of them isn't ranked above the other. They're just all different ways of thinking about and approaching a question or an
Hmm.
issue. And I love that. And yeah, your conversation with Catherine was so fun to listen into.
I'm glad it
Mhm.
was fun for other people. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I
I am
like the
pretty
fact too.
voyeuristic though, so
I like the fact too that we kind of renamed those, and to me, it just pays tribute to the fact that the podcast has a very clear focus, but also it's just very broad, and it appreciates, like Tiffany, you said at the beginning, the research side of things, like the evidence-based practice, but also the practice-based evidence, maybe. So both ends of that spectrum, and to me, that's just a very, very, very great
Mhm.
picture there, that we have those different categories, and that maybe people are also getting a more clear sense of what they're getting, and it gets more clear what is all included in the package.
And I think
mm,
that experience is so important. It's so easy when people get intrigued with research and science, like it's so easy to be curious and really start to lean that way and forget that even with the best research and the best theory, there's always people who don't respond. So our
Hmm.
experience is in many ways the most important. We use this research and science to help support our theory, but eventually we have to work with the person in front of us. So the experience is
It can
so
be a really
valuable.
helpful starting point when you're sort of walking into a situation with a student and you haven't got a clue. For me, the
Mm,
research can really help, kind of like shining a torch, start this direction, test this out and see. And then
mhm.
that gives you some idea of whether you continue in that direction or whether you change course.
And the experience, I think, too, speaking from your experience, one thing we do at Yoga Medicine is we try to be really clear when we're speaking from research and when we're speaking from experience, knowing that both are equally valuable. But it is really helpful, again, to debunk some of those myths, to not facade as everything being research and like
Mhm,
cut and dry, right or wrong. Like there's a lot of ways to do it. And, I think it's important to speak from that experience too. So
mhm.
there's been so
And then
many great ones too. Sorry.
sorry, and then also, just to be aware that even if there is no research out there for a certain topic, it doesn't mean that there is not going to be research. So kind of
Mm.
that wild land that no one has looked at, maybe even, just being aware that just because there's no study on this doesn't necessarily mean it's not any less true. It's just maybe we're 10 years early or 20 or 100. Could
We're
be.
doing our own I mean, every time you're
Yeah.
working on your own body with another student, you're doing an investigation. You're doing a form of research. It's one of the reasons why in our teacher trainings, one of the first things we do is teach our teachers how to do a therapeutic evaluation. Basically to be able to chart their progress over time, which a lot of yoga teachers don't do. And it's really important for being able to do that investigation so you can reflect back and see what's working and be able to monitor and shift. And unless you just have some crazy steel trap memory, which I don't have. Like, when you're seeing a bunch of people, you gotta write it down, so
Only for advertising jingles from the 1980s. Other than that, everything else comes and goes from my brain.
you probably do.
I totally do, I'm not
I
lying.
love that.
I
Oh.
could rattle them off now, but I'm not going to. One of the things that struck me as well, it struck me all the way through. I remember talking to various guests and saying, this has come up so much in previous episodes, but it really hit me as I was preparing for this conversation that there have been some real repeated themes, things that have come up again and again and again. And one of them won't be surprising because it's come up already several times in this conversation, which is curiosity being our superpower, whether
Mm,
that is something that kind of staves off burnout and keeps us coming back to a practice over and over again, whether it creates space when we're dealing with a condition like anxiety or pain, um, or trauma, that curiosity seems to come up in the research roundups. It's just this undercurrent that weaves its way through everything that yoga medicine does, I feel like.
mhm. I couldn't agree more. I think curiosity is such a potent tool.
Mhm. So that was
Mm,
the first one that really struck me. And I remember in episode 5 on sustainability and yoga, Tiffany, you were saying curiosity can't be taught. But I've been reflecting on that and I wonder if it can be taught. I think you were talking in the context of teachers. Like you want to be the kind of teacher who's got really vibrant curiosity,
mm,
and you're either that kind of person or
yeah.
you aren't. But I do think as teachers, we can nudge our students in that direction by teaching in a way that we're asking questions for them to answer, or we're saying things like, today we're going to try it this way, see how it feels, see how you respond, with the kind of unspoken assumption that tomorrow it might be a different way, as opposed to this is how this pose or this practice is always done.
Mm.
So as I listened to that, I was thinking maybe it is something we can kind of teach people.
I agree with you. I don't know who that Tiffany chick is, but I think I'm with you.
I think it made
It's
perfect
hard.
sense with what you were saying at the time. But yeah, the more I think about
I'm
it, the more
not
I'm
sure
like,
what the context was, but yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's those questions we plant as yoga teachers. I think
mm,
for me and my teaching, I've kind of leaned a lot more into questions rather than telling people. I mean, there's a tricky kind of line to walk there because sometimes people just need to know, where do I put my
yeah,
block? Where do I do
you've
this?
got to
But
have some level of structure.
yeah, but having those questions, I think, can be a way of hopefully teaching or learning curiosity, maybe.
Mm. at least
And
encouraging it.
I would definitely say so, but I also would say that if you're not aware of that theme of curiosity, and if you're not intentionally maybe also speaking to that, there can definitely be scenarios where hmm, where you maybe are making it harder for people to be curious. For instance, if you would like tell them what to think in every single situation, or be very clear what is wrong and right, like we've said on here today a couple times, um, yeah, you definitely are not fostering curiosity, or are even, just not making it possible. And I think that theme, if that's at the top of your head when you're teaching as a yoga teacher,
Mm.
it's definitely a plus, because you can definitely go the other side with that one, I think.
Yeah, and I think for people who have trouble cultivating curiosity, if you're putting all these things out, I mean, I know one thing I think of is burnout. We talked about burnout in the episodes too. When people are
Mm,
really exhausted and burnt out, it can be difficult. This was what Rachel was talking about before too. It can be difficult to find that enthusiasm and intrigue and
mm.
the brilliance of the yoga practices, that we can just shift to some of those more restorative and nourishing practices as a way to not necessarily always need to be on and curious and thinking and
Yeah.
but more
I
introspective.
like the general idea of having some structure and then areas for curiosity within that structure. Because even when we were talking about sustainability, I do think it came up that curiosity can take you down a million different rabbit holes. So there's got to be some balance to that, or you never
Mhm.
finish answering the first question because you've answered or at least asked 35 other questions along the way.
Speaking of which, of rabbit holes,
Hmm.
back
Have
to
we
our
have we fallen down one?
themes.
So the second one that really came up in multiple episodes was consistency, the power of not just the thing
Mm,
that you do the one time, but little and often, little and often, little and often. So this came up in stretching myths
frequency.
and research. Yeah, frequency
Frequency
over
over
duration.
duration. Ooh,
Mhm.
yeah, I love that.
And even in episode 31 with Diane Malaspina talking about the
31, look
power
at
of
you've
an
got the numbers. Wow.
I got them written down. I did
That was
say I
You're
had
fancy.
really
pages.
Sorry. Pulling
you're
it out
really
here.
prepped.
Yeah, pages of it. Well, I want people to know which episodes, go back and listen to episode 31, The Power of Intention with Diane Malaspina. She was talking about how setting an intention primes your brain's pattern recognition functions. And even that made me think of
Mm,
the little and often thing. If you've kind of got starting the starting situation right, you see all of the little cues and clues and all of the little opportunities along the way. Mark Hunter in episode 33, Age Well with Yoga, that was his single biggest takeaway. When I asked him to kind of wrap up at the end, what would you say in terms of using our practice to support um, healthy aging? He said, little and often. Pick the things that you will
mhm.
do and then do them every day.
Repeat.
And even in Lessons Learned Inverted with Amelia Schrader, which is episode 40, she talked about inversions not as being this big, fancy, exciting thing, and not even really as some massive way to challenge your fears, but as this journey of patience. And I think that's true for a lot of the
Mhm.
endeavors that we
I
care
couldn't
about
agree
in
more
life.
with that one.
Mm,
Yeah, I love that. Definitely agree with all of those. And it's,
yeah.
it's kind of one of the reasons why, and again, in our teacher trainings, one of the things I'm always saying is like, start with just one or two poses, get really clear for homework, for when you're working one-on-one with students, just give them one or two things. And then I'm building up that muscle too of finding a new routine, and then I can add on. But then again, it's that frequency over duration. It's so key for almost every system of the body. It's
Mm.
so important, so I love that. What
And
else have we
so,
got? Oh, sorry.
oh, so hard sometimes, isn't it? Like, if I could think about things I want to do, I would still picture in my head that, like you've mentioned with the house where you write your book, like a 4 week long or
Mm,
52-week
Sabbatical.
doesn't
long
that sound fun?
personal yoga teacher training slash retreat, where I do all the things that all the lists that can be out there entail. And obviously it's just not happening. So sometimes that's like the huge dream out there, and then it's just the reality is 15 minutes of breath work and meditation at night in my bed with my toddler on my belly sleeping there. um Yeah, so sometimes, it's just that's
You
the
pick the thing you can
reality.
do.
You pick the thing you can do, and it's definitely the more sustainable one, but the
Yeah.
dream for the 52-week yoga academy is still deep in me.
Pick the thing you can stick to too, I think is the big thing. In my
Yeah,
meditation book,
definitely.
I have people start with 2 minutes. Like everyone can
Mm,
do 2 minutes a day, and the research suggests that even doing a few minutes of meditation a day does have benefits. So
yeah.
we know that, it will accrue as we do more, but just getting a few minutes in is so important and building the habit, for everything.
Yeah,
What
I
else have you
agree, and
got?
I see
Oh,
frustrating things where people are like, "If you can't do X minutes, then don't even bother." I'm like, "Bother, bother! Come on, 1 minute's
yes.
better than 0 minutes." Next thing on the list, the next big theme was that there were some big levers that we could work on that would create big outcomes, and I'm talking about things like working with the autonomic nervous system or stress, things like sleep and nutrition, movement, meditation, these things came up again and again as if you can only do one thing, hone in on the thing that's going to have the biggest outcome. And often that was our response to stress or improving our sleep. So we're, more capable of making good decisions or more resilient to stress.
Totally.
Yeah, the
I mean, I think that's
stress.
everywhere. It's like it's kind of it's kind of almost cliche at this point as the cure all for everything, but it's cliche for a reason. You know,
Mm,
eat good food, drink plenty of water, get good sleep, move, breathe, stress regulation, sleep, all
mhm.
of those things are so key, and it's so easy just to kind of brush them off as cliches or too simple, but they are potent.
Yeah. And I liked this one in combination with the previous one because the suggestion is if you are overwhelmed, if you are living a very full life as Katja is, and you can only pick one thing, see if you can pick the one thing that will have the biggest outcome. And maybe that is your sleep. Maybe you've got toddlers and you can't control your sleep. So it's your responses to stress or something
Mhm.
else. So, yeah, to pick the thing that would have the biggest outcome.
Love
And
that.
I also like throughout the episodes that a couple of the things that we've explored exhaustively, of course, was fascia, and I just love it's one of the areas where all of these things come together: the autonomic
Hmm.
nervous system, but also stress hormones and other things related to that. Yeah, so it doesn't even sometimes need to be too specific because just movement and just our yoga practice in general, with all the components that it entails, will speak to that. And then there are those tissues in the body weaving it all together. So yeah, that's fascinating to me every time that there are those big levers, and then there are some systems in the body that kind of weave them in all together. I love that.
Mhm. Well, and I
I think
think
that's why
another
the fascia
theme
has
is
come up in so many episodes.
yeah, yeah. And I think one of the other things is simple is potent is a theme.
Mhm,
And as you start to look at these, at people who've done our trainings, like we go in really deep and we see all the details and we start to understand why and how the simple things can also be really beneficial. That doesn't
mm.
mean, that's everything to the equation, but even just doing a simple slow flow or yin practice. I mean, they're all being affected in
5 deep
different
breaths.
ways. As we get into the science and the research, we can kind of get more specific to how and when we might use it. But there is an intuitive sense to a lot of this that is actually built in. So we don't
Mm.
always have to overthink it as well, I think. Simple as potent.
Rattling on with my list, yes.
Yes.
Next
Yes.
next big theme on the list, and we're close to the end, people, the power of perception, the importance
Ooh.
of language. Obviously, we kicked this off with the placebo
Mm.
effect and the nocebo effect, huge impacts on pain and healing our perceptions of stress. This came up a lot in episode 15 with Marnie Hartman on shifting persistent pain, that you can totally rewire your responses to pain by changing your language around it. And instead of it being this, terrible and terrifying and monolithic thing, to get kind of curious and to try to get to know it. This came up
Mm.
in Katja's favorite episode, episode 10 with Mackenzie Kozlowski on navigating change. She talked about giving words, giving voice to your fears by writing them down, and that taking away a lot of their power. This came up with Megan Kearney in episode 13 from Setback to Success when she talked about reframing setbacks as the hero's journey, as this dark night of the soul that you have to go through to get to the other side. It's not You got to be in the suck to get to the payoff at the other side. And it even came up in episode 42, Boundaries as Self-Care with Yelly Staley, where she talked about reframing saying no and setting boundaries as an example of self-love, which is something I hadn't really thought about before. So again and again, again, in obvious ways and really subtle ways, perception and language came up.
I think mindset and intention is everything. It's so
Hmm.
huge. I mean, whether you want to talk about pain or mental health or just, purpose and subjectivity of how we feel in our lives is such an important
Mm.
thing.
And
And the
also as
words that we
teachers, right?
use.
The words we use, I was just gonna say that as teachers, we
Mm.
sometimes say, "Oh, it's like a soft skill how to choose our words," but in fact, it probably should be like termed to be a hard skill, if that's a term even, I don't know, but it's so important to focus on that. I think it's not just a soft skill; it's so much more.
So
I
important.
agree.
I
Totally
think
foundational.
too, as you have been teaching more, you realize that, there's a whole art to teaching, but I think language is such a big part of that. And sometimes just being more succinct, so that there's like these moments of silence where people actually hear and do what you're saying, right? So that intention and mindset kind of comes across in that as well. I love that.
And my last big takeaway we've kind of talked about already, which is that people are surprising, that there is individual variation in expectations, responses, outcomes, that it is fantastic to have the research that tells you what the tendencies are across a large number of people. But at the end of the day, you've got to work with the person in front of you. And if you're not a teacher and you're an individual, that person is you. So you've got to pay attention to how you're responding, what your experience is like, and
And
to keep that open-minded curiosity.
And you are your own best teacher. I mean, whether you're a yoga teacher or a student here, I think it's important to remember you're the only one who really knows, who lives in your body
Mhm.
and knows that experience. So you are your own best teacher. We have teachers who are guides. It's important to have guides along the way. But you're the only one who knows. And that individuality
Mm.
is so important.
And I think for yourself, but also if you're teaching to a group of people, just letting go of a story you might have made up, that's a core competence in itself. Like having that
Mm.
capacity to reflect that allows you to let go of knowledge of a story, particularly if you're interested in research like we are. Um, and then actively accepting that what is at hand or in front of your eyes may not reflect that what you have in your head. It's not
Hmm.
easy, but I think that's another core competence that really should be
Mm.
fostered.
And I think the story can sometimes be about them. Sometimes we think our students want something specific or need something specific or are there for something or like something about us. Or it can also be about ourselves. Like we think we're either capable or incapable.
Mhm.
We can be our own greatest hindrance, sometimes our own beliefs in ourselves. And the people around us believing in us and encouraging us has such a big effect on that too, how that plays out as well. So
I thought a
so
lot about listening when I was thinking about this sort of subtopic. And one example was the South Asian teacher panel, the episode 21, where I was just kind of sitting there listening to them all telling their stories. And it was one of those episodes where I feel like, oh, it would have been so much easier to have them give me 5 things that I needed to do to be a good, respectful teacher. But that's really not how we learn. And it was just about setting aside my assumptions and expectations, listening, and letting that be the magic. And Shannon Stevens talked about that too as one of the hidden benefits of yin, this inherent power of just sitting with and listening without even needing to create change. That in itself has magic, and often changes do occur.
I love that. I love that we had that panel too. We need to do more. We should do another one of those next year.
Yeah.
The panels are fun too to kind of like hear a bunch of different perspectives, which,
That's what
you
I
know,
loved about it, is that they weren't all in agreement on everything. They had different experiences and different thoughts and feelings, and that's how the world is.
yeah. And we need to be able to find a way to support each other and see other ways of thinking. I think it's so important right now in the world. Everyone's,
Mhm.
it's, I think most people are very strongly opinionated about how, what they see and how they believe it to be. And I think that's fine, but we also need to be open to the fact that other people are going to have different ways of seeing it, and that's okay as well. I think that's an
And I
important
do
part
feel
of our
like
yoga
the older
practice.
I get, so
It's
that's
fun to
that's it
watch.
for my big list of takeaways. I'm excited for lots more conversations. We got some juicy stuff to come.
There were so many great topics too. I feel like we went through
Mm.
so much. We talked a lot about fascia. We talked about hormones, and we talked a lot about stress in different contexts and pain in different contexts,
Mhm.
mobility in different contexts. We talked a lot about stretching, specifically anxiety, about pelvic floor health, trauma and
Yes.
tension,
Mhm.
aging. Look at this list:
Yep.
MFR, shoulders, low back, hips, inversions. But then we also had such great topics. I really loved hearing Chelsea talk about addictions, or sorry, eating
Yes.
disorders, and Laura talk about addictions and the
Yeah.
epigenetics and cancer, breast cancer, and of course, Katja talking about nitric oxide. We talked about concussions and parenting,
Mhm.
boundaries, mindfulness, pharmaceuticals, sustainability, burnout. I mean, there were so many great topics, and for me, I feel like just so much warmth and in my heart, and just so proud of our community to be able to hear the wisdom of our teachers and their
Mhm.
experience, because in many ways our teachers are the ones out there doing the work. I'm back here prepping teacher trainings and and doing my thing, but at this phase our teachers are the ones, and you guys too are out there doing the work. And so I just love that we can come full circle as yoga medicine now, and have all these really expert teachers who have been, doing this for so long, and have such great expertise to draw from, to come and listen, and I get to learn as well. And really give our listeners, one of the other things I love is one, being able to provide these free resources for people. I know teacher trainings are expensive, and it's an investment of time, of energy, of money, of travel, of sometimes if you're coming in person. And so whether you can't make it to a training, or you're between trainings, it's so important to me to keep our teachers really inspired and fed, and provide these free resources, so that those listening, whether you're a teacher or not, also have tools to be able to tap into these inner resources, which I think is so cool with yoga. We don't need a lot of expensive gear or props or fancy things, but we're learning how to unlock these inner tools, these inner resources, and understand and navigate this owner's manual of our body, of our mind, of our spirit. And so I've just really enjoyed being able to hear the amazing things our teachers are doing. Um, it's been such a great time.
And hopefully only just the beginning. We've got so many other things to come and so
I
many
know.
teachers that we haven't tapped into yet.
Katya, any final notes from you?
Uh, I just this conversation alone has already I wrote down a list of 3 more topics I have at hand. So this is really
Oh,
inspiring myself or inspiring me, and I just hope that people out there feel the same. I feel the 3 of us, we could rant on forever because we feel the same
right.
about this. Um, but also on the side of producing this content, it's just very inspiring to me, and jumping from one rabbit hole into the next is just my MO. I love it.
Yes. Such a good time, and I have to end just by saying I'm so grateful for you guys. I love working with you guys. It's such a pleasure to be able to go and dig in deep, and also learn ourselves. I'm so grateful for the people who listen and comment, and those who give us nice ratings, or any like ratings are good. Tell us your feedback, and um I'm really grateful for the feedback that you guys give us too, so that we can learn and grow and evolve as well. We're in the process of learning too, and we love suggestions. If you have topics you want
Mm.
us to cover, if you had favorites that you really loved that you want more on, or you just want to send us a note that you really enjoyed it was helpful, or any feedback, it's so appreciated. We love connecting with our community and really appreciate you guys. Lots of warmth here for you guys and the heart. And we hope to have a great next year with all of you guys hanging out with us. So here's to a wonderful year behind us and a wonderful year to come. Thank you guys for joining us, and we look forward to next year. Thank you guys.
Yay!
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com, or check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine. You can also email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being a part of our Yoga Medicine community. We look forward to seeing you again. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.